The world turns, and with each turn, a change. And each change makes it more complex, unpredictable, enigmatic. The world keeps turning. And from the Pellicer and Heredia practice, we anticipate everything that is going to happen. Brexit, artificial intelligence, new commercial borders, legal tech. The world keeps turning, and it commands the reliance on international lawyers who are capable of interpreting this new reality with integrity, honesty, and transparency, offering answers to so many new questions. Whatever it is, ask us. At Pellicer and Heredia, we know how.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ignacio, loud and clear.
We can hear you. Hello, good afternoon.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to start introducing in the panel all our special guests and excellent lawyers that we've got here. We've got on one side Mary Elms from is an expat in Spain, and we've got Robin Kaplan as well, another American expat. Today, we are trying to concentrate on the American expat living in Spain, and they're going to join us today, and they're going to share some views, some questions, and probably will be able to give them some positive answers. On the other side of the panel, we've got from the south part of Spain, Michael Davies from Davies Solicitors, Abogados. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ignacio. Hello, everyone.
And we've got from Alicante side, we've got Pedro Heredia, international lawyer from Alicante. Hello, Pedro.
Hello, Ignacio. Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
Right. Today, we're going to share with you some information about living in Spain. And I believe we've got experience we've been as well. I think Michael's been in the United States, Pedro as well. We have been in the United States, and we really have a good relationship, a good feeling with the expat community, and we're trying to give an answer today. Before going and jumping into the panel with all the questions, that please feel free to send them all over to us now. We've got 1 hour, and if not later on, all the one in the panel will share with you their emails, so you could contact direct and even organize a video conference if it's a private thing. If you're moving from the US to Spain, the first thing you'll have to look into is the immigration side. A lot of you might be coming for 3 months, go back and forth. So you've got the possibility to come as a tourist, 3 months within 6 months. Okay, so you come as a tourist, 90 days without 180 days. You've got the second option if you're not coming to Spain to retire, but if you're coming to retire and to live in Spain, to apply for a non-lucrative visa, and you will do it from the Spanish consulate closest from your residency of origin. So it will depend on the state where you are. You'll make the application here and you will do the fingerprint in the city where you are. If you're deciding to buy a property and not necessarily means that you want to become a fiscal resident in Spain, you could even apply for the golden visa, which you know it will be buying a property over 500,000 euros or even investing in a deposit, safe deposit, €1 million as one of the characteristics. Juanfran is going to share with you here some articles about the visas in Spain, and we'll put it on the panel for you to read. So there is some you will come with a work visa. That's a bit more difficult, and even like a self-employed worker in Spain. Okay, so that's from the immigration side. I'm sure that's one of the main things you need to do. Some people decide to come over to Spain, buy a property here, or even start renting, going back and starting the visa. That's another option. With regards going briefly into the tax issue, you need to bear in mind whether you're going to be non-resident or resident. If you're a non-resident tax, you'll pay all your tax in the home country, in the United States. You know, United States and Spain has a double taxation treaty, And if you're a resident, bear in mind you need to fill in, and we are on time now to do the 720 form, which is from January to March. You need to declare the worldwide assets abroad over 50,000 euros, bank account, shares and bonds, and even property in case the purchase value was over 50,000 euros. Then once you come over here, you might rent, you might buy a property, and you need to take into consideration the option of making wills, power of attorney and wills. We're going to go into it, and before I'm going to pass on to Mary if she wants to say something, and Robin and the panel, and we'll get straight with the questions. Over to you, Mary.
Hi, Ignacio. Thank you for inviting us here. We look forward to the seminar. I have been an expat for 4 years in Spain, and Ignacio has helped us immensely, his law firm, in several different matters, from the 720 to the taxes to residency renewal. So we decided that we were going to ask Ignacio to put this seminar on, and he kindly obligated, him and his law firm, so I'd like to thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I will just pass it over to Robin if she wants to say something, and anything else you would like to add here for the expat community.
I am Robin Kaplan, and I too have been here for 3 years. And Ignacio's firm just helped us with our residency renewal, which when we did it 2 years ago was an absolute bear to accomplish. And I have to say, this renewal was an absolute piece of cake. So I felt really comfortable in offering our endorsement to offer this seminar to other expats, because it's really been a blessing for us. And I hope everybody gets something wonderful out of this.
Thank you, Robin. Michael, would you like to say something about the American community here? Because you've been in the States as well, and you've got a lot of experience.
First, welcome all the Americans that are here in Spain. From now on, you won't be discriminated regarding legal information, because the UK residents who have been very well looked after for legal information up to now are now in your same situation. So all the information that applies to you in this webinar today is now also applicable to UK residents. If you have any questions about wills, probate, or inheritance tax, that's what I deal with. I'm in Andalusia, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions on those matters.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And for, Pedro, would you like to say something before we just start moving on with the questions? You're an international lawyer in the Law Society in Alicante. Would you like to share something with them?
Okay, well, just to say, well, thank you for all the expats that are listening to us, American expats living in Spain. I personally have a special connection with the US because I lived there. I studied in high school 1 year. I have a fantastic year in Connecticut, in a little town called Clinton, like the ex-president. And I studied in high school, so it was a fantastic year. I lived with a family, and I feel the United States like my home country also. So apart from Spain, also is UK, as you know. I've been living also in the UK, United Kingdom, but also the United States for me is my home country as I live there. And well, when I listen the American accent in the street in Alicante, where there are many expats also, I just turn around and see who is speaking with this accent. I hope that all of you are going to enjoy this seminar, and of course we will try to answer and clarify some questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to share with you guys experiences. So please feel free, and we're going to start now with questions and answers. As I said, I will be grateful if you guys would send your private email and telephone number, just in case some people need to leave the webinar. And I know when it's recorded, something doesn't stay, and we will just say later on. So just in case people need to leave and speak to you. Okay, going on the panel says, I think we've got Lorna Leva. I'm qualified to obtain Italian citizenship recognition and plan to pursue that within Italy sometime this year. Should I complete that first or apply for my Spanish non-lucrative visa first? The goal is for my husband and I to reside in Spain. I don't know, Pedro, would you like to say? I believe he's an Italian qualified to obtain. Probably he's an American. I don't know if he's an American, but probably qualified to obtain nationality in Italy. Once they have nationality, I believe it will be completely different because they will be European, isn't it?
Okay, now you listen to me? Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely, Ignacio. I mean, of course, if whoever is going to obtain a citizenship and a passport from the European Union and the Schengen area, of course, will be easier in order just to obtain residency in Spain. Of course, the other way, I mean, a general queue, as I say normally is, of course, a non-lucrative visa. The requirements are higher, the limitations are higher. So, of course, if could go to the path of the route in order to obtain the Italian passport in this case, and then after that obtain the residency, because it will have some other requirements. This is not like if it is obtained, the Italian passport is going to be easier. It's going to be like free access to residency in Spain. We'll have to also acquire some requirements, but those ones are minimum. And so it will be easier, of course, if it has this option. It's always recommended.
Okay. Yeah, basically, I think the right road to go will be if they could get the citizenship. I don't know if the marriage, the whole, the couple, but just the one, obviously, as Pedro said, try to prove that you live in Spain during 3 months with 9,000 euros minimum in the bank. Okay, you'll have to have private insurance, photo, padron, like pretty much like the process we've been facing now with the UK, that actually they still are lodging all these TIE based on the withdrawal agreement. So the Italian will have this opportunity. And I think it's a good road more than a non-lucrative visa. But if you are complying with the requirements of the non-lucrative visa, I believe you could start joining that and then do the other later on. Okay. Let's move on. Are you using, we've got Liana. My mother was born in Puerto Rico. I was born in USA. I plan on getting a Puerto Rican citizenship certificate after 2 years of established Spain residency. May I apply for citizenship by using Ibero-American? Can I be a college student with a non-lucrative visa? With a non-lucrative visa, if I live in Spain, do I pay taxes for both Spain and the US? If I get Spain citizenship, but live in the US, will I have to pay Spain taxes? Well, a lot of questions, Pedro.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah, okay, well,
if we go with the first one, a citizenship by using Ibero-American.
At the end, using, I mean, of course, Spain has many conventions between many of the countries in the world. Obviously, most of them, all of them, I would say they are ex-colonies from Spain. So in this case, Puerto Rico, it has some special reduction on being resident in Spain in order to obtain what or acquire the citizenship in Spain. But could be done that way. I mean, if it's Puerto Rico, I think this is what you said. Being a college, I think you also, one of the questions that you said is what being a college student through a non-lucrative visa, this could manage to be done that way. I mean, the non-lucrative visa, let's make a brief scenario about the non-lucrative visa. The non-lucrative visa, it is really a retirement visa. Some it could be used, can be flexible in order to be used in when someone is not being really retired, but is for people which is not going to be working in Spain. It's going to be living in Spain, retired in Spain, and not working, because it's forbidden to work in Spain. It is not allowed to work in Spain. Are you allowed to study in Spain? Yes. You cannot work in Spain. That's the main point. Is non-lucrative visa is for those that do not need to work, do have sufficient money to live in Spain, do have to show that they have enough money to live in Spain, and of course, in this case, for example, it's compatible to study. The answer is yes, with a non-lucrative visa. Regarding taxes, well, general rule: once you obtain the residency, the non-lucrative visa, or through golden visa, and you really are resident in Spain for tax purposes, because the golden visa is also some differences on that. Whenever you are living and resident in Spain, and for those purposes you are tax resident in Spain, you have to declare and pay taxes accordingly in Spain regarding Spain and US double taxation treaty. For example, and this is just a basic example, private pensions needs to be paid 100% in Spain. Government pensions, like comes from public employment, needs to be paid fully 100% in the US. A state pension that can be paid in the US and is deducted according to the double taxation payment declaration between Spain and the US. And in most of the states, it works like we call it in taxes is deducción inversa. It's paid in the US, it's paid in Spain, and whatever is paid in Spain is refunded in the US. This is theoretically it works this way. So, I mean, it's important to understand the double taxation treaty. It's important to understand which is your income and where is input that income. Is it dividend, interest, because it's not the same. There are really like two scales on taxes in Spain. One scale is because, for example, dividends, interest, capital gains, which is between 19%, 21%, 23%. And the other scale is this scale that I've used in. It goes from 19% to 47%, and is going to be changed in the near future. It looks like by the government of Spain. So this is the two scales. You need to identify perfectly where your income comes from and where is input, and of course to understand where it needs to be paid in the US or in Spain. I mean, if this type of, let me read it, the policy, if it's qualified, sorry, I didn't understand really the question. The latest question, it was, will I have to pay Spain taxes? Well, if you are living in Spain and you reside in Spain, the answer is yes. But according to the double taxation treaty, if you get, let's say, a government pension because you've been working as a policeman or we have a client, for example, from a public employment, that declaration or that taxes needs to be paid in the US and not in Spain.
Okay, thank you.
For example, but of course, it's something that if you live, general rule, if you live in Spain, you declare in Spain and you pay accordingly to the double taxation treaty.
Okay, Pedro, thank you. Right, we've got Terry. He says he's going to retire and move to Spain, but he's planning to do the first week of July. I think he's calculating properly to try to avoid tax residency having 183 days. When does the 183 days clock start here? If I come early to rent a place to move into and get my padron, does that start the clock? Do you want to go on that, Pedro, about because I think he's right here. He really calculated the 6 months. So after July, you start in August, it's less than 183 days. Then he needs to get his residencia. If he's moving to Spain in that date, well, to be honest, the starting is from the day he just get his passport stamp, which I believe he will come either as a tourist, or I believe if he's an American or British or Canadian, he will have the non-lucrative visa or the golden visa. We didn't even talk about the golden visa here yet. So if I come early to rent a place to move into and get my padron, does that start the clock with padron? Not really. To be honest, Pedro, I don't know what you guys think, but it starts when you get your passport stamp, because you'll have your non-lucrative visa resolution saying, yes, you're allowed to come to Spain. And then you've got, I think there are 30 days to do the fingerprint, Pedro. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. There is no microphone here.
Okay, Ignacio, let me, if I understood correctly the question, because there was some interruptions and I didn't listen very well. It looks like that the question is focused on where does start
the tax calendar.
The timing really for taxes. Of course, if the residence is got the second semester of a year, let's say someone is applying right now in these following months, the non-lucrative visa, and the period of time, as we know, could take between 3 and 5 months until someone gets really the residency. That second semester of a year will count as non-resident for tax purposes. And that 183 days, it counts in a natural year from the 1st of January to 31st of December. Once you obtain residency, this year, for example, in July, I think this is what you said, Ignacio, This year you will not be resident for tax purposes in Spain. Following year, 2022, you will be tax resident, and for those matters, 2023, you will have to declare your tax return in Spain between April and June. But before that, in January to March, it will have to be declared as an informative application. We call it in Spanish is Modelo 720, is application form for tax purposes 720, which you need to inform in case that you have assets over 50,000 euros outside Spain. You need to declare them, and this is an obligation.
Okay, thank you, Pedro. All right, I don't know if Michael wants to add something else here.
No, I'll wait for the questions on wills and inheritance. I can see there's quite a few. So
all right,
when we get
to
those,
right, perfect. Let's get down to them then. How is to retire in Spain in terms of living on a national pension in eventual retirement as an expat? Is it better for me to get a Spanish passport as a dual citizen? Has to retire in Spain in terms of living on a national pension in eventual retirement? I think the question Graham he's saying is about getting a pension in Spain. I'm not sure, but as far as I know, he needs to contribute into the system, into Spain, at least I believe 15 years. I don't know if Michael or Pedro knows the minimum time to contribute into the Spanish social security. But I believe in terms of getting a national pension here is you need to pay into the system, okay? Now we have Diana saying that she's a non-lucrative visa holder. She's working remotely, as a lot of people are doing now. What is my income tax liability? I work for a US-based company. Actually here, Diana, I've been doing the taxes today for somebody else. And if you don't earn on income less than 14,000 euros per year, you're not obliged to lodge your tax declaration if that's the only income you have. Let's say you have money from investment, even more than 1,000 euros, then that obviously makes you obliged to lodge your tax. But if you're only receiving money from work, 14,000 euros, if they are not paying taxes in Spain, okay? If the US-based company, well, if the company was registered in Spain and paying tax and you only have one pair, the minimum obligation will be 22,000, okay? But don't want you to confuse you with that figure. I think Michael, I don't know where there are the inheritance questions here, because if you want to read them, please.
On the chat, I can see.
If you can read them.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see. I was reading them before. Now I've lost them. Where are they? Okay, there's a question on the chat coming through on the, I think it's on the Zoom chat. Greg Brogdon. My wife and I have recently updated our wills and estate plans. How difficult to convert all documents to Spanish legal standard once we reside in Spain? Okay, I think what we're saying here is that he's already done a will and things out in the States, and what happens when he moves over here? Well, without any doubt, what we recommend, and I'm sure it's the same that you recommend as well, is that once he arrives in Spain, if he has assets in Spain, he should make a Spanish will to deal with the Spanish assets, and leave the estate planning that is done in another country states just to deal with those assets in that country. If they are North American and it's a couple wanting to leave everything to each other on the first step and they have children, it's important that when they make the Spanish will, they choose their national law to determine how they're allowed to distribute the estate, because otherwise we know that causes lots of problems. So that would be the answer to that one. I think there's a couple other sort of similar questions below.
If you want to go on, Michael, if you want to go on your own.
I'll see if I can find them. Okay, one here. Hello, Michael. If when my husband and I purchase a home in Spain, we want our son to inherit, would it make sense to include him on the title deed immediately? Also, if we should apply for a mortgage, would it be best to include our son on the mortgage? He's younger than 30 and we are over 70. Okay, this seems like a simple question, but it is actually not, because we don't know where in Spain they're moving to. And of course, if they do this, I imagine it's because they want to, they're trying to avoid inheritance tax in the future for their son. But depending on where in Spain they move, this may or may not be a problem. If they move to Andalusia, their son would have an allowance of €1 million in any case, so they wouldn't need to do anything to avoid the future inheritance tax unless the house was worth more than $1 million. And Madrid's got very generous exemptions as well. So depending on where they're going to live, if they move to one of the regions where there is inheritance tax for the son, they could do a donation, but they have to be careful where they do it, because also, like inheritance, donation tax in Spain, in some places it's exempt and some places it's not. So if, for example, it was in Andalusia, the donation would be exempt, or almost exempt, up to €1 million, so it would be no big deal. But there are some areas of Spain where there is both donation tax and inheritance tax. So if they're, for example, living in the UK, if they're living in the States, they'd have to do the donation in the States first. So they'd have to speak to an accountant to make sure there's no donation tax in the States, and then move the money over already in the name of the son. In other words, it's a question that's got quite a lot of variables to it. So they really should sit down with the solicitor that handles their conveyance maybe for them and work out what is the best thing for them. So, because the answer is basically, it's not necessarily a good idea. It will depend on their circumstances.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. If you wish, if there is anyone, just raise your hand and then we'll jump onto it. I'm going to just carry on with the next question from Ramon. Can you discuss dual taxation for those of us who will be Spanish fiscal resident, but also US citizens? Well, Ramon, the thing here is there is a dual taxation treaty. I mean, we could even do a webinar about all these situation. The only thing I could say, civil service pension will be taxed in the US or in the home country where you are, according to a dual taxation treaty. We're talking about US this time. Private pensions, you will pay in Spain. And sometimes if you're obliged to pay even in the US, what we're doing is you do it in the US and here we deduct it if you had to pay over there. So you could deduct, as Pedro explained before, some taxes that you had to pay in the US. You will never pay double, okay? So important thing for you to know, civil service pension, then compensating whatever was paid in the US. So probably you want to do it in April, the tax in the US, and then you later on will do it here. That's an option. And I know dividends, there is a minimum tax you need to pay in the US according to the double taxation treaty. So that's roughly, if you want to be more specific on your questions, we could just clarify. We move on here, Michael. Yes, Michael.
There's a question I think from Mary about wills. Why do we need to make a Spanish will if we already have, I think, a will in the States? I think that's from our panelist. Yes, from Mary.
Yes, it's from Mary.
Okay. If you move out to Spain and you have no assets in Spain, then you don't need to make a Spanish will. You just keep your assets dealt with under the will in the States. Now, if you buy other assets in Spain, then it's not obligatory to make a Spanish will, but it is extremely highly recommendable, to the point that I'd say it should be obligatory. Why? Because later on, if let's say you buy an apartment in Madrid, whatever, then when it comes to winding up the estate, if we haven't got a will in Spain, we've got to then take the will that you've signed in the US, wait for it to go to probate in the US, and then convalidate it with Hague's apostles, official translations, etc., to be used in Spain. That in itself adds a lot of complication and expense and difficult to meet the deadline for a payment of inheritance tax and things. But more than that, sometimes we're faced with wills coming from the States, the same as the ones from the UK, that mention the word trust on them, because trusts are widely used in the US, like in Australia, Canada, and the UK. Now, when they mention the word trust, it creates tremendous complications when we can validate, and it can actually cause a very serious inheritance tax problems in Spain. That's why, without any doubt, if you have assets in Spain, a separate will in Spain to deal with those assets.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Let's move on here. I think we've got Mandy here for visa purposes. Greg Brugman, I think you went through. Then Ramon is living here as well, his details. And then Mary, let's run through the questions that probably you both gather from your association, that you're members. And I've been asked by others to submit the following. Residency. How many months must you live in Spain to retain temporary resident status? Per year or per year term? Could you clarify that question, Mary? You're talking about immigration, correct?
In other words, if you were a legal resident of Spain on a temporary status, because you have to have, what, 2 renewals before you can become permanent. So in those 2 renewals, in the first or the second one, how many months do you, or how many days? Is it 183 days that you must be in Spain in order to comply with the residency requirement?
Well, you're talking about tax?
No. Just in order to be able, like, I have a visa.
Yes.
And in order to, say, get renewed the next year, how many days do I need to live in Spain in order to be able to get approval on a renewal?
Yes, you need to be minimum 6 months in Spain is a requirement, correct? So minimum 6 months is the answer.
Okay, the second question is then, once you become permanent, so you've already gone through the 2 renewals, and now you want to become a permanent resident. How many months must you live in Spain in order to comply with the permanent residency requirements?
As far as I understand, is always, since it's a non-lucrative visa, even though it's permanent, you always need to become resident here. So you need to be minimum 6 months per year.
Actually living in Spain.
Yes. Okay. And we didn't mention here, for those who spend more than 10 years in Spain, they always will be qualified, as Pedro said, 10 years residency, you could apply for nationality. That's always an option that you could apply for. And for those, as the people on the panel from Puerto Rico or Iberian countries, 2 years, they could apply for nationality. Otherwise, Mary is 1, 2, 2, and 5, and then 5, but always complying with the minimum requirements. Okay.
And then one of the other questions that came is, when you become a permanent resident, I've seen posts from others that they believe that once they become a permanent resident, that they are able to apply into the national healthcare system and it would be free of cost. Is that correct?
Well, as far as I understand, I wouldn't be able to confirm for sure, but if you didn't contribute into the system and for free, I wouldn't think so. Okay, I think you will be able, Social Security, there is a way for you to join after, if you don't have an insurance, or well, even if you have an insurance, you could start, you could join Social Security with a flat fee as well after 1 year being resident in Spain. Okay, you know, the non-lucrative visa, and they request you to have a private insurance, but you can still join the public health system as well. It's a flat fee. If you're below 65 years old, I think you pay 57 euros, and after that 160 something euros into the system. But it's not exactly the same coverage than if you are like working, you're in the system as an employee, because you'll have a bit more, like a percentage discount on medicines and things like that, you know, or if you retire here and you're a pensionist into the system. Okay. Right, let's move on, Mary. I think you have more questions here about capital gain tax, you said here.
Oh, for me?
Yeah,
sure.
Is there a different tax rate on capital gains, or is it based on the total income for any given year? Right, the capital gain tax is always 19, 21, 23, up to 6,000 euros, 19%. From 6,000 euros up to 50,000 euros is 21%, and from 50,000 euros over 23%. Okay. Michael did already go through wills, right? And you mentioned here, what does the Spanish government do with a foreigner body if they die in Spain without funeral plan? Well, I think it's the same system as for an Spaniard, basically. The state will take care of it, you know. And but sometimes I'm dealing with a case that even through the American embassy, it will look after as well and contact the family and probably the family. So the American embassy will be informed of that. And as far as we've been experimenting this situation, they will try to find the family members, and the family members could repatriate the body, and etc. etc. So that's but Spain always will cover that as well, you know. Let's move on. Are heirs of Americans with Spanish residency subject to inheritance tax? If so, what do you recommend for limiting the impact? I think, Michael, I think you mentioned.
What was the question?
Stefan 613.
Could you just read it out? I can't actually see it.
Yeah. Are heirs of Americans with Spanish residency subject to inheritance tax? If so, what do you recommend for limiting the impact? Because it will depend what area, Michael, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, this is a great question though, because from what I understand, the beneficiaries are not residents in Spain, are they? They are resident in the US. I think that's what they're saying.
Heirs of Americans with Spanish residency. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they both cases.
The first thing is that we need to understand is that in Spain, each region of Spain has different levels of exemptions. Okay. Now, initially, those extra exemptions, which are extremely important because they greatly reduce inheritance tax bill, especially for children and spouse. The important thing is that up to now, the beneficiary had to be a resident in that region to take advantage of those exemptions. Then there was a sentence by the European Court of Justice that extended that to residents in the EU that were inheriting in Spain. Now, last year, there were a couple of sentences of the Spanish Supreme Court that said that that should be extended also to residents in third-party countries. Now, those changes that the Supreme Court is suggesting are not yet part of the Spanish legislation, but if you claim them on the inheritance deed and on the self-assessment form, you claim those exemptions on the basis of those sentences. At the moment, it looks like everyone gets away with it. We've presented a few. It's true that the taxman has 4 years to disagree with us. And of course, we've only been presented them 2 years. So it's going to be put to the test a lot now, of course, because with the UK leaving the EU, all the residents there in the UK, there are many of them inheriting from their mum and dad here in Spain, we're all going to have to go apply those 2 sentences to avoid them paying inheritance tax. And the difference between being allowed to claim those exemptions and not is tremendous. I mean, we're talking about if somebody a child inherits in Andalusia a property of 300,000, with the exemptions, they won't pay anything. Without the exemptions, they could easily pay 40 or 50,000 euro inheritance tax. So those sentences are very, very important. And we're seeing quite a few self-assessments being presented without the person that presented them claiming the exemptions. So it's very good.
Yeah,
question.
that is good.
Yeah.
Good. Let's move on, Michael. We've got here Ivy. They're just doing their residency in Valencia. I think there are a lot in Valencia, and they're unsure about the process of taxes this year. Do we submit to our US accountant first and then have our Spanish accountant file, or vice versa? Well, from my experience, what I could tell Ivy is that yes, I will recommend you to do it first thing in April. Try to inform them that you're a no tax resident in the US and try to see how they work out there as a non-resident in the US. And then here you bring it to your tax advisor and try to always implement the dual taxation treaty as Pedro stated. Okay, let's go with Graham. On the citizenship question, Pedro, I wonder also if I should aim for an Italian passport. My wife is Italian, or a Spanish one. We plan to retire in Spain and Italy. Well, if your wife is Italian, I believe that she should, when she comes over here, the way to do it is to get her first the European residency, the TIE card, well, not the TIE, the green card side, credit card side, and then you'll be a family member of a European citizen. I don't know if Pedro wants to add anything to it, but being Italian is a European, and therefore a family member of a European, that will be the best way forward. Do you want to add anything here, Pedro?
Yeah, I mean, this is the best forward. I mean, of course, I mean, if someone obtains at the end the Italian passport, at the end, of course, we'll be applying the residency with lower requirements, and of course, any family member will be able to be added, be attached on this application. That will be easier, of course, on those requirements.
Okay.
And the timing also, the timing will be easier, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Donna Leva, I think Michael already went through it. That question, Graham is asking, is it actually feasible to retain in Spain as a US expat?
The world turns, and with each turn,
I think, yeah, we're having a problem here. Right, let's move on. Graham is saying, is it actually feasible to retain in Spain as a US expat on a resident permit? Or is it citizenship explicitly required?
Well, it is not. I mean, always answer this. I mean, it is needed to apply for citizenship, but it's not really needed. I mean, as much as you apply for residency, you obtain residency, you fulfill all the requirements to obtain residency, there is no need to apply for citizenship to acquire a Spanish nationality. And if there is no need and there is no special requirements for having to live in Spain with a US passport, which is not, well, it's perfectly normal just to stay with your citizenship in the US, American, and stay in Spain. Normally, there is no need to apply for specifically the Spanish nationality. And well, if it's feasible to retire in Spain as a US pact of a residence permit, as much as you fulfill all the requirements for the non-lucrative visa in this case, or golden visa, or any other residence permit, perfect. I mean, this is something that is feasible.
Okay, Steph is asking, are you taxed on income from assets or on the total value of assets? Well, your income tax return is only worked out according to your income, okay? So you will only be taxed according to the income you have, pensions, interest, dividends, etc., etc. Probably when you say the value of assets, it is something completely different. 720 is just declaration. So later on, you will do your income tax return. And wealth tax is, as Michael went through, depending on the area where you are, is whether you have over certain amount, okay, of money as wealth. Okay, so there's two different forms for you to consider. Now, Stefan, I think he's got a very good question, Pedro. Can I work outside of Spain virtually with a US company with a non-lucrative visa? Well, non-lucrative visa doesn't allow you to work in Spain.
Okay, let me first.
Over to you.
Let me first answer. I mean, of course, this before question, just to, I mean, if you are taxed in income from assets or on the total value of assets. Okay, on tax return, income tax, there are, let's say, two scales. The one scale is what we say about interest, capital gains, which goes from 19% for the first 6,000 euros. From 6,000 euros to 50,000 euros is 21%. And over 50,000 euros is 23%. That's one of the scales on the tax return. The other scale goes like from steps. So basically it goes from, for example, it's 19% from over to 12,450. I mean, there are some minimums which, in order to deduct this base, it's a little bit complicated, but from that amount to the following step, which is 20,200 euros, it goes to 24%. From that amount to 35,000 euros, 35,200 euros, it goes to 30%, and so on. So it goes from 19, 24, 30%, 37%, and 45, and go on, and it's going to be changed. So this is one of the scales of income, and the other scales for another kind of income. Let's say savings, let's say interest, let's say dividends, and let's say salary, another kind of income. So these two scales needs to be added in the tax return, and of course needs to be combined into in this case for the US, Spanish US double taxation treaty, in order to be able to where this income needs to be taxed, and if it needs to be paid some part in the US, totally in the US or totally in Spain. Okay, having said that, about the question that you are saying, and it's a question that we are receiving more and more, and there is no rules really on this. And I wish I could be clear with that, but I cannot. Well, what I can say is that, I mean, the non-lucrative visa do not permit you to work in Spain. Having said that, and this is the general rule, does this mean that I can work in Spain, but not getting a job inside the Spanish system, which is virtually in an American company while working virtually, telematically by my computer? Well, there are no rules right now. I mean, and the answer would say no. I mean, if you are asked in order to say, are you going to be working in Spain? Because a non-lucrative visa, you will get an appointment, you may have a test, a personal appointment, and well, if you say you're going to work in Spain, you're going to need those income for working in Spain. You will be rejected, totally, fully rejected.
I think the question, Pedro, I think the question is, can I work outside of Spain? So here, with a non-lucrative visa.
Well,
so,
I mean, we're talking outside of Spain. So I understood it was living in Spain. Even though living in Spain has some gray areas, I would say. I mean, outside of Spain, you are not working in Spain. The main thing and the most important thing is really to answer, do you need that money to live in Spain or to have a residency in Spain? Because if it's that, you will be rejected. The non-lucrative visa, it means that you have enough money, savings without working. So you're going to prove to the Spanish authorities that you don't need to work to live in Spain with a minimum fee.
Right.
If you have enough money to show to Spanish authorities that you're able to live in Spain without working, but you also work, perfect.
Right, let's move on because time is running out. Jose Medina, he says he's a resident in Spain. Well, his daughter is a resident in Spain and will be he will become Spanish citizen shortly. My wife and I want to move to Spain as residents. Is her being a Spanish citizen an advantage for us? Well, is a very big question, isn't it? We really don't know, Jose, whether it will be good for you or not. I think we need to sit down probably and just have a better picture from a tax point of view, from the way you want to live here, whether you want to come here on holidays. Every scenario, I believe, is different. So it's very open. But as quality of life here, I know you will be happy. That's for sure. Let's move on. Steph, same for retirement funds. Are you taxed on the total value or only on the income generated by those? I think Pedro went through it. Retirement funds, if it's a pension funds, it's treated as an income. If you have general income, like Pedro said, interest, dividends, is treated in a different scale. We have Kerry. We are a retired couple in Alicante province, 5 years residency, non-lucrative visa. Our gestor has handled everything for us very well, but has not recommended we fill out the Modelo 720. We know no one who has Spanish, British, French. We have no problem with doing it, but I understand the EU approved the law, but the outrageous penalties for not filling are in question. Is there any news regarding this penalty situation? I don't know if you want to comment. Michael, will you want to give an update here?
Yes, well, the obligation, there is no doubt, exists. I mean, all that has happened, otherwise the obligation exists. All those terrific fines still exist. They're still the law. It is true that the government, Spain, is quite shy about applying them to the maximum potential. And it is true that the EU has sort of told Spain that in reality, they have to sort of temper down those fines that they're imposing. But at the moment, the law hasn't changed. It's obligatory, and the potential fines for not doing it are as high as they always have been. That is.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, is Social Security, Steps is asking, is Social Security income from the US tax? Yes, it will be taxed in Spain, but it will be deducted if it's taxed in the US. We went through it. Now, Jay has a question. If I am married and retired, but have a working spouse, am I eligible for a non-lucrative visa? And if so, how will taxation be addressed by Spain? Pedro, would you like to run through Jay's question?
Okay, well, thank you, Jay.
He is not working. I believe he will be eligible for non-lucrative visa with no problem. But she's working. I really don't know where is she working. It will be a different type of visa.
Well, at the end, yeah, at the end, I mean, if it's going to be another visa, working spouse, which is going to get a residency or working, probably as a family member will be able to have that right also in order to be attached on that application. But of course, he will be available to apply for non-lucrative visa as much as it is showed sufficient money to live in Spain. And of course, the criminal code, all these requirements that has been said, but of course, sufficient money to live in Spain during the period that is authorized. Is 1 year, or is renewal of 2 years plus 2 years, but it's basic that you show exactly the minimum amount of sufficient money to live in Spain.
Mm-hmm. Right, Brett, if I am resident as an American in Spain, but my income is all from the US, are the Spanish taxes assessed after I have filed my US taxes, Pedro?
Yeah, this is what, we call it, this is what we said, I mean, is the deducción por inversa. I mean, some, for example, you already said that, private pensions, 100% needs to be declared and paid in Spain. What about the government pension? Public pension, but from the government, that needs to be paid in the civil servant pensions, needs to be paid must be paid in the US. This is, I would say, normally in most of the international convention between Spain and different countries for avoiding double taxation. But what happens with the state? Well, that is deducción inversa. Maybe it's paid in the US and then it's paid in Spain and it's paid back in the US, whatever is being paid in Spain, or is paid some amount, some part in the US, and then the rest in Spain, deducting whatever is being paid in the US. But this is how it works. I mean, of course, the problem is what is considered from the US, that even though you are living in Spain, you are tax resident in the US, and then it is subject to the jurisdiction understands that you are tax resident in both countries, and then wants to charge you for your worldwide income in Spain or in the US.
Pedro, what is the current wealth tax percentage in Valencia community? Do you want to just, we have an article here in our blog, which really published the scale, but do you want to explain the 600,000, etc.? Yeah,
I mean, wealth taxes individually, if for example, a couple, one, I mean, this is a threshold of 600,000 euros, will be able to be deducted your property, your permanent property you live in Spain, maximum of 300,000 euros, and the tax scale. This is a scale. I can show it right now. If if
you could share the article.
Exactly. Let me look for the article.
Yes, if you could. Let's move on. I have a question for Michael about buying a property in Spain. Michael, could you please explain what kind of advice if an expat is making a decision? Because I know a lot of people are making decisions on renting. Americans are very, very always into renting, but a lot of them decide to buy a property. Will you give them a little bit tips of advice what they should do? Because you have a lot of experience on property as well.
Well, the first thing obviously is to find what area of Spain they like, because Spain, Spain is very different depending on where you live. I mean, it's not the same being in Madrid as it is being in Andalusia or up in Valencia region. They've all got pros and cons. I think the whole of Spain is fantastic, but they're all very different, and even the climate's very different as well. So once you've got that out of the way and they know where they want to purchase, the first thing is, and coming from me, it sounds a bit thing, but basically to choose a good solicitor to handle the conveyancing for them, to keep them safe. Take into account that when they purchase the property, they have to add on about 10% for all the different taxes and fees that they'll be paying. I'd also say to be very cautious about with the decision of whether to become a resident or not, because it has a lot of effects with the taxes, etc. So they do need to speak to an accounting firm or a firm of solicitors like yourselves that specializes in taxation. I always recommend it a quick chat to have an understanding of the difference in inheritance tax depending on what region of Spain you buy the property at. This is not important if you're buying a property under 150, 200,000 euro. In those levels, it's not important. But if somebody's going to buy a villa that's worth €1 million, €2 million, the difference in inheritance tax from one region to another can be absolutely incredible. So to have a consultation with a lawyer about inheritance tax if you're a high net family. And that's really about it. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk. The other thing I always think is very, very important is to make a Spanish will as soon as you've purchased the property in Spain.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I agree with you. And actually, as Michael said, the tax planning thing is very important for people to do. Inheritance tax planning, income tax planning, etc. So you really have the answers of your specific case, which every case is different for all of us. So I think all these homeworks are more and more common now, Michael, rather than the old days when people just came over here with not even...
Well, Ignacio, as you know, in the old days, Valencia region had one of the best deals in Spain for inheritance tax. Andalucía had one of the worst. That has now changed. But if you remember years ago from our office in Marbella, we had to send you, and it was very painful for us, we had to send you lots of clients to buy high value properties up in your area. Why? Because they would come to us for consultation about inheritance tax, and we'd have to tell them that if they bought in Marbella and one of them passed away, they'd have to pay 300,000 euro in inheritance tax, while in Valencia it was zero. So of course, what did they do? They decided that they preferred the villa up in Moraira or Calpe or something like that. That's now slightly changed, but it is important. There's a lot, as I say, with high net families, there's a big difference in inheritance tax between one area of Spain and the other.
Okay, that's good. I don't know if Pedro wants to add anything about property. Pedro, would you like to add any comment here? Because otherwise we'll just move on.
Well, at the end, it's extremely important. I agree with what has been said by Michael. It's important. Once you apply for residency, once you obtain residency, first thing is, in my opinion, is to avoid inheritance conflicts. Is written a will in order to be able to apply the law, like national law, in order, and it's important to be informed which is the scenario in case the Spanish law is applied. And regarding, it's important, of course, is linked the will with the residency whenever someone is gonna acquire assets in Spain. At the end, buying a property is a big investment, and of course, everybody says different inheritance taxes is to be paid in Comunidad Valenciana. Right now in Andalucía is, as Michael said, is in some circumstances, I would say in most of them is better deductions, but it's something that, of course, with a good planification on taxes, with the income, with the wealth tax, with the Modelo 720. At the end, immigration is highly connected, of course, with taxes. Whenever you become resident in Spain, and it's important to make a will in order to avoid some complications if the Spanish law is applied. Well, all of these things that we are talking about is extremely important.
Thank you, Pedro. Ramon is saying here you'll be living in Cantabria and in El Campello, two different places, very far away from each place. So he would appreciate everyone's contact. So it will be great for Pedro, Michael. Could you please put it on the chat again, your contact details, just in case they miss it, and your telephone number, so people could contact you. But obviously, as Michael is daviessolicitors.com and Pedro pellicer.com, just for those who do not see the panel. We're reaching here pretty much. We have so many questions still to go, and I think you feel free to send us the email, even if you need a personal consultation, which I think is high value always, because you could plan ahead yourself. I thank Mary for your support, Robin, Michael, Pedro. Thank you very much for all your always help. is 1 hour already, and we need to just pretty much close. So I pass it over to Juanfran, and I say goodbye now until the next webinar. Okay.
Thank you for inviting us, Ignacio. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Ignacio.
Ignacio.
You're new to Spain and in need of legal help. When you're in a country that is foreign to you, you want someone who speaks your language, who understands you, and who will have an answer to all immigration and nationality matters. At Pellicer and Heredia, you can count on a specialist in international law and a multidisciplinary team that can help you handle all the necessary formalities. Do you want to take advantage of the Golden Visa program? We will help you obtain the residence visa for investors through the purchase of a property or via a business project that you're looking to develop in Spain. Do you need a residence permit? Obtain it for non-profit purposes or through family, work, study, research and training purposes. If, on the other hand, what you are looking for is a renewal, we take care of the whole process, so all you need to do is leave your fingerprint. We also deal with re-entry permits in the case that you want to leave and return to Spain. And of course, we help you obtain the certificate of registration as a European citizen, the foreigner's identity number, Spanish citizenship, and the certified translation of documents in all languages. Because at Pellicer and Heredia, we know that speaking your language is the only way to gain your confidence. Trust that we repay with 2 words: professionalism and commitment. Pellicer and Heredia, international lawyers.